The stars outside the observation window looked cold and distant as Lieutenant Emily Park walked through the metal corridors of the starship Horizon Edge. Her boots made soft sounds against the floor, and her heart beat fast inside her chest. She had received her new assignment just 1 hour ago, and she still could not believe what Captain James Rivera had asked her to do. Take care of 12 juvenile Velthary predators, alone, for at least 2 weeks. Emily stopped walking and leaned against the wall. She closed her eyes and tried to calm herself down. The Velthary were one of the most dangerous species humanity had ever encountered in the galaxy. They came from a planet with gravity twice as strong as Earth, which made their bodies incredibly powerful. They had 4 arms, and each arm ended in a hand with retractable claws that could slice through metal. Their scales were dark blue and purple, and their eyes glowed amber, in low light like the eyes of cats back on Earth. And now 12 of their young ones were waiting for her in cargo bay 7. Emily remembered how this whole situation had started. 3 days ago, the Horizon Edge had picked up a distress signal from a damaged Velthary cruiser. The ship had been attacked by pirates, and many of the adult Velthary had been badly injured. Captain Rivera had made the decision to help them because humanity was trying to build better relations with the Velthary species. The injured adults were now in the medical bay, receiving treatment from Dr. Michael Torres and his team. But the children needed someone to watch over them. Someone to feed them and keep them safe, and make sure they did not cause trouble on the human ship. Captain Rivera had called Emily to his office that morning. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, and he had looked at her with something like sympathy when he gave her the assignment. "Emily, you have training in xenobiology," he had said. "You studied Velthary behavior at the academy. You are the best choice for this job." Emily had wanted to argue. She had wanted to tell him that studying something in a classroom was very different from actually doing it in real life. She had read about Velthary hunting patterns and social structures and communication methods, but she had never actually been close to one of them before. And now she was supposed to take care of 12 juveniles who had all the predator instincts of their species, but none of the self-control that came with being an adult. But she was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. So she had said yes, sir, and walked out of his office with her stomach full of butterflies. Now she stood outside Cargo Bay 7. The door was large and gray, and there was a small window at eye level. Emily looked through the window and saw them for the first time. The 12 Velthary pups were scattered around the cargo bay, which had been cleared of equipment and filled with sleeping mats and food containers and toys that the Velthary adults had brought from their own ship. The pups ranged in size from about knee height to waist height on Emily. Their scales came in different shades of blue and purple and green. Some of them were play fighting in the corner, using their claws on each other in ways that looked violent, but were apparently normal for their species. Others were eating from the food containers or sleeping in small piles. Emily noticed that the largest pup was watching the door. This one was female with dark purple scales and eyes that seemed more intelligent than the others. According to the information the Velthary adults had provided, this one was named Rika, and she was something like the leader of the group. Emily took a deep breath. Then another. Then she pressed the button to open the door. The sound of the door sliding open made every single pup stop what they were doing. 12 pairs of amber eyes turned to look at Emily as she stepped into the cargo bay. The play fighting stopped. The eating stopped. Even the sleeping pups woke up and lifted their heads. Emily felt like a small animal walking into a den of wolves. She knew they could smell her fear. All predator species could detect the chemical signals that prey animals released when they were scared. Her sweat contained those chemicals right now. Her racing heart was pumping them through her body and out through her skin, and the Velthary pups could definitely smell them. Emily expected them to react with aggression. In her xenobiology classes, she had learned that predators often responded to fear signals by attacking. It was instinct. When something smelled like prey and acted like prey, the predator brain said to hunt it. But the pups did not attack. Rika, the largest female, tilted her head to one side. It was a gesture that Emily remembered from her studies. It meant curiosity, not aggression. The other pups looked at Rika as if waiting for her to decide what to do. Emily cleared her throat. She tried to make her voice sound steady, even though her hands were shaking at her sides. "Hello," she said. "My name is Emily. I'm going to be taking care of you while your parents are getting better in the medical bay. I will bring you food and make sure you have everything you need. I hope we can be friends." She felt stupid saying that last part. These were predators, not puppies. They did not want to be friends with their food. But Rika made a soft chirping sound, and the other pups seemed to relax a little bit. They did not come closer to Emily, but they also did not bare their teeth or extend their claws. They just watched her with those glowing amber eyes. Emily walked slowly to the food storage area in the corner of the cargo bay. She checked the containers to make sure there was enough protein paste for the pups. The Velthri were carnivores, and they needed a lot of protein to fuel their powerful bodies. The paste was made from synthesized meat, and according to the information she had been given, the pups needed to eat 3 times a day. As she worked, Emily kept glancing over her shoulder at the pups. They had gone back to their activities, but she noticed that at least 2 or 3 of them were always watching her. It made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her mother and father lived in a small house in Colorado. Her younger brother Kevin was a university student studying to be an engineer. Emily missed them all so much. She had not seen them in person for almost 2 years because of her assignment on the Horizon Edge. What would Kevin think if he could see her now? He would probably laugh and call her crazy for agreeing to babysit alien predators. But he would also be proud of her. Kevin had always believed that Emily could do anything she set her mind to. Emily finished checking the food supplies and turned around. Rika was standing about 10 feet away, watching her with those intelligent amber eyes. The pup had moved so quietly that Emily had not heard her approach at all. Emily froze. Her heart started racing again, and she knew that Rika could smell the fresh wave of fear chemicals. But Rika just tilted her head again and made another soft chirping sound. Then she turned and walked back to the other pups, leaving Emily standing alone by the food containers. Emily let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Maybe this would not be so bad after all. Or maybe she was just telling herself that to keep from panicking. Either way, she had a job to do. And Emily Park had never failed at a job in her entire life. She was not going to start now just because her charges happened to be baby apex predators from another world. She squared her shoulders and got to work. 4 days had passed since Emily Park became the caretaker of 12 Velthri pups, and she was starting to think that maybe she had worried too much at the beginning. The pups had settled into a routine. They woke up when the ship lights brightened to simulate morning. They ate their protein paste from the containers that Emily refilled 3 times each day. They played and fought and chased each other around the cargo, they burning off the endless energy that young predators seem to have. And when the ship lights dimmed to simulate night, they piled together in warm sleeping heaps and closed their glowing amber eyes. Emily watched them from the small desk she had set up in the corner of the cargo bay. She had brought her personal tablet and some of her belongings so she could stay close to the pups at all times. Captain Rivera had assigned her a small sleeping area behind a partition, but she rarely used it. She felt like she needed to keep her eyes on the pups as much as possible. The strange thing was that the pups seemed to be watching her just as much as she watched them. At first, Emily thought this was predator behavior. She assumed they were sizing her up, trying to decide if she was a threat or perhaps even a potential meal. But as the days passed, she started to notice something different in the way they looked at her. There was curiosity in those amber eyes. Maybe even something like interest. Rika, the largest female, was the most obvious about it. She would sit a few feet away from Emily and just stare at her for long minutes at a time. Sometimes she would tilt her head from one side to the other, as if trying to figure something out. When Emily moved around the cargo bay doing her duty, she would often turn around to find Rika following her at a careful distance. The other pups kept their distance, but Emily noticed that they always seemed to know where she was. If she walked to one side of the cargo bay, their play fighting would slowly drift in that direction too. If she sat down at her desk, they would settle into their activities nearby, rather than on the far side of the room. It was strange behavior for predators. Emily had expected them to either ignore her completely or treat her as something to hunt. Instead, they seemed to be treating her as something to watch over, something to keep track of. Emily did not understand it, but she was grateful that they had not tried to eat her yet. On the morning of the fourth day, everything changed. Emily was sitting at her desk going through her messages on the tablet when a communication alert popped up on the screen. It was marked as urgent, and it came from Earth. Emily felt her stomach drop, because urgent messages from home were never good news. She opened the message and started to read. The words on the screen seemed to blur and swim in front of her eyes as their meaning sank into her brain. The message was from her mother. It said that Kevin, her younger brother, had been in a terrible accident. He had been driving home from the university late at night when another vehicle had crashed into his car. Kevin was badly hurt. He was in the hospital. The doctors were doing emergency surgery, but they did not know if he would survive. Emily read the message 3 times. Each time the words hit her like a punch to the chest. Kevin, her little brother, the boy who used to follow her around the house when they were children, the teenager who had cried at the spaceport when she left Earth for the first time, the young man who sent her funny messages every week to make sure she did not get too lonely out in the stars. Kevin might be dying, and Emily was 47 light years away. She did the math in her head, even though she already knew the answer. Even if she left right now on the fastest ship in the fleet, it would take months to get back to Earth. By then, Kevin would either be recovered or he would be gone. There was nothing she could do. No way to help. No way to be there for her family when they needed her most. The tablet slipped from her fingers and clattered on the desk. Emily stood up so fast that her chair fell over behind her. She needed to get away. She needed to be alone. She needed to fall apart somewhere that nobody could see her. But there was nowhere to go. The cargo bay was her entire world right now. The pups were everywhere. She could not leave them alone, and she could not call someone else to watch them because everyone on the ship was busy with their own duties. Emily stumbled to the far corner of the cargo bay behind a stack of storage containers. It was not private, but it was the closest thing to private that she could find. She pressed her back against the cold metal wall and slid down until she was sitting on the floor with her knees pulled up to her chest. And then she started to cry. The tears came fast and hard. Great sobs tore out of her chest, and her whole body shook with the force of them. She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying to muffle the sounds, but it was no use. The grief and fear and helplessness were too big to contain. She cried for Kevin lying in a hospital bed so far away. She cried for her mother and father who were probably sitting in a waiting room right now holding each other's hands and praying for good news. She cried for herself because she was stuck on this ship in the middle of nowhere and she could not do anything to help the people she loved. Emily was so lost in her pain that she did not notice the cargo bay had gone quiet. She did not notice that the sounds of play, fighting, and chirping had stopped. She did not notice 12 pairs of amber eyes. Turning to look at her, she did not notice Rika standing up and sniffing the air with her secondary Nostrils flared wide. The scent of human distress filled the cargo bay. It was different from the fierce smell that Emily had given off during the first few days. This was deeper and more complex. It was the smell of grief and despair and a breaking heart. Rika had smelled this scent before. She remembered when her mother had received news that her littermate had died in the border wars. Her mother had made sounds like the human was making now. Wet choking sounds that came from deep inside the chest. Rika looked at the other pups. They were all staring at the corner where Emily had hidden herself. They could smell it too. They all knew what that scent meant. The human was hurting. Not on the outside where you could see the wound, but on the inside, where the hurt was invisible, and sometimes even worse. Rika did not know why she cared. The human was not pack. The human was not even the same species. But something in Rika's chest felt tight and uncomfortable when she heard those crying sounds. Something in her wanted to make it stop. Something in her wanted to help. She chirped softly to the others. They gathered around her in a loose circle, waiting to hear what she would say. Rika thought about what her mother did when someone in the pack was hurting. She thought about the soft things and the warm bodies and the presence of family pressing close to remind you that you were not alone. Maybe the human needed those things too. Rika made her decision. She chirped her instructions to the pack dot, and then they scattered to gather every soft thing they could find. Emily did not know how long she had been crying. Time had lost all meaning. There was only the pain in her chest and the tears on her face and the horrible, helpless feeling of being too far away to do anything that mattered. She had her face buried in her knees and her arms wrapped around her legs. She was trying to make herself as small as possible, as if she could somehow disappear into the corner and escape from reality. The metal wall was cold against her back, but she did not care. She could not feel anything except the ache of missing her brother and the terror of not knowing if he would survive. A soft sound made her lift her head. Luna, the smallest of the Velthree pups, was standing right in front of her. The little creature was barely knee-high with pale green scales and eyes that seemed too big for her face. She was holding something in her front two arms, and she was pushing it toward Emily with determined little nudges. It was a thermal blanket. The silver kind that the ship kept in emergency supply lockers. Luna must have somehow gotten into one of those lockers and pulled the blanket out. Emily stared at the pup in confusion. Her brain was foggy from crying, and she could not understand what was happening. Luna made a soft chirping sound and pushed the blanket closer. Her amber eyes were fixed on Emily's face with an expression that almost looked like concern. Before Emily could react, another pup appeared. This one was Theo, a male with dark blue scales and a scar on his snout from an old play fight. He was dragging something behind him, using his back two arms while walking on his front two. It was a pillow. One of the big fluffy pillows from the sleeping area. Theo dropped the pillow next to Emily and chirped at Luna. Then he turned and hurried away as if he had somewhere important to be. Emily watched him go. With her mouth hanging open, more pups started arriving. Max brought a fleece jacket that Emily recognized as belonging to one of the engineering crew. Sophie came carrying a stuffed animal that looked like it had been borrowed from the children of crew members in the family quarters. A pup named Sam dragged in a pile of clean towels from somewhere. Another pup named Grace appeared with what looked like a fuzzy bathrobe. One by one, the 12 Velthree pups brought their offerings to the corner where Emily sat. Blankets and pillows and soft clothing piled up around her. Someone brought a knitted scarf. Someone else brought a plush toy shaped like an earth cat. There was a soft sweater and a quilted comforter, and even a fuzzy rug that must have come from somebody's personal quarters. Emily could not believe what she was seeing. These were predators. These were the children of apex hunters from a world where showing weakness meant death. They should not be doing this. They should not care that she was upset. They should not be gathering soft things to make her feel better. But they were. They absolutely were. Rika supervised the whole operation. The large female stood a few feet away chirping instructions to the other pups. She pointed with her claws when someone brought something and showed them where to put it. She was building something, Emily realized. She was directing the others to construct a nest around Emily, a barrier of softness that grew higher and thicker with each contribution. When the gathering seemed to be complete, Rika approached Emily directly. The large pup moved slowly and carefully, as if she knew that sudden movements might be scary. Her amber eyes never left Emily's face. Rika stopped right in front of Emily and tilted her head in that curious way she had. Then she made a sound that Emily had never heard before. It was a low rumbling purr that seemed to come from deep in her chest. The sound vibrated through the air, and Emily could almost feel it in her own body. Rika stepped into the nest of soft things. She turned around once like a cat making a bed, and then she lay down right next to Emily, pressing her warm, scaled body against Emily's side. The other pups followed their leaders. Example: Luna climbed into Emily's lap and curled up in a tight little ball. The small pup started making that same purring sound, and Emily could feel the vibration against her legs. Theo settled against her other side. Sophie and Max and Sam and Grace and all the others found spots in the nest, tucking themselves around Emily until she was completely surrounded by warm bodies. They were so careful. Emily noticed that every single pup had retracted their claws completely. Their scales were smooth against her skin and clothing. They arranged themselves to give her warmth and comfort without any risk of hurting her. Emily sat in the middle of this pile of alien predators, and she did not know what to feel. The tears were still wet on her face, but the terrible alone feeling was starting to fade. How could she feel alone when 12 small bodies were pressed against her from every direction? How could she feel abandoned when these creatures who barely knew her had gathered every soft thing they could find just to make her feel better? Rika lifted her head and looked at Emily. The large pup made another sound, and this time Emily's translator implant picked it up and converted it to words. Safe. The translator said in a flat, mechanical voice, "Pack. Safe." Emily felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were different. These were not tears of grief and fear. These were tears of something else. Something warmer. She whispered to Rika. "You think of me as Pack." Rika tilted her head. Then she leaned forward and pressed her scaled forehead against Emily's cheek. It was a gesture that Emily remembered from her xenobiology studies. Among the Velthari, it was a sign of deep bond. A way of saying you are mine and I am yours, and we belong together. Emily had never expected to receive that gesture from anyone, let alone a juvenile predator she had known for only 4 days. She wrapped her arms around as many of the pups as she could reach. Her hands touched smooth scales and warm bodies, and she felt the vibration of purring from multiple sources. The nest of soft things surrounded them all, and the warmth seeped into her bones, and for the first time since she had read that terrible message from home, Emily felt like maybe things would be okay. She did not know if Kevin would survive. She did not know if she would ever see her brother again. But she knew that she was not alone. She knew that these strange alien children had seen her at her lowest, and instead of looking down on her or taking advantage of her weakness, they had chosen to help. They had chosen. Pack. Emily closed her eyes and let herself sink into the comfort of the nest. Luna purred in her lap. Rika pressed warm against her side. The other pups breathed slowly and steadily around her. For now, this was enough. For now, she would let herself be held. Tomorrow, she would figure out how to be strong again. Tomorrow, she would check on the status of the adult Valkyrie and contact her family for updates about Kevin. Tomorrow, she would be Lieutenant Emily Park, the competent officer, who never failed at any assignment. But tonight she was just Emily, a human far from home who missed her brother, a woman surrounded by creatures who had decided for reasons she might never fully understand that she was worth protecting, worth comforting, worth loving. She fell asleep in the nest of soft things with 12 predator pups keeping watch over her. And for the first time in a very long time, she did not have any bad dreams. Commander Lisa Chun walked through the corridors of the Horizon Edge with a cup of coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other. Captain Rivera had sent her to check on Lieutenant Park and the Valkyrie pups. It had been almost 6 hours since anyone had heard from Emily, and while that was not necessarily unusual, the captain wanted to make sure everything was okay. Lisa had known Emily for almost 3 years. They had served together on 2 different ships before both being assigned to the Horizon Edge. Emily was one of the most reliable officers Lisa had ever worked with. She was calm under pressure and good at solving problems. And she never complained, even when she was given difficult assignments. Taking care of 12 juvenile predators definitely counted as a difficult assignment. Lisa reached the door to Cargo Bay 7 and looked through the small window. What she saw made her stop completely. The coffee cup froze halfway to her lips, and her eyes went wide with surprise. The cargo bay had been transformed. Where before there had been an orderly arrangement of sleeping mats and food containers, there was now a chaotic mountain of soft things in one corner. Blankets and pillows and clothing were piled together in a messy nest that took up a large portion of the floor, and in the middle of that nest was Emily Park Dodd. She was asleep. Her face was peaceful, and her breathing was slow and steady. Her eyes were closed, and her body was relaxed in a way that Lisa had rarely seen in her friend. Emily always carried tension in her shoulders, like she was ready for something bad to happen at any moment. But right now she looked completely at ease. The reason for her relaxation was obvious. She was completely surrounded by Valkyrie pups. Lisa counted them. All 12 were there arranged around Emily, like the petals of a strange alien flower. Some were pressed against her sides. Some were curled at her feet. The smallest one was actually sleeping in her lap with its head tucked under her chin. The largest one, the female that Lisa remembered, was named Rika, was lying right next to Emily with one of her forearms draped protectively over the human stomach. They were all purring. Lisa could hear the low rumbling sound even through the door. It sounded like a dozen tiny engines all running at once. The vibration must have been incredible for Emily to feel. Lisa raised her hand to press the door button, but she stopped when she saw movement inside the cargo bay. Rika had lifted her head. The large pup was staring directly at the door with her amber eyes narrowed. Her lips pulled back slightly to show the tips of her fangs. She was warning Lisa to stay away. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She had read the files on the Valkyrie. She knew that even a juvenile could cause serious harm to an adult human if it wanted to. Those claws could cut through bone. Those fangs could pierce body armor. And right now, all of that potential violence was aimed at her. But then Lisa understood something. Rika was not threatening her because she saw Lisa as prey. Rika was threatening her because she saw Emily as pack. The pup was protecting her caretaker, the same way she would protect one of her own kind. Lisa slowly lowered her hand and stepped back from the door. She was not stupid enough to challenge a protective predator. Whatever had happened in that cargo bay, it was clear that disturbing them now would be a very bad idea. She walked back down the corridor and opened a communication channel to Captain Rivera. "Captain," she said quietly, "I found Lieutenant Park. She is fine. Better than fine, actually." "What do you mean, Commander?" Captain Rivera sounded confused. Lisa thought about how to explain what she had seen. "The pups have accepted her," she said finally. "They built some kind of nest around her, and they are all sleeping together. I think something happened. Something that made them bond with her." There was a long pause on the other end of the communication. Then Captain Rivera spoke again. "Is she in any danger?" "No, sir." Lisa shook her head, even though the captain could not see her. "If anything, I think she is safer than anyone else on this ship right now. Those pups would tear apart anyone who tried to hurt her." Another pause. Then Captain Rivera made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Well, I will be damned," he said. "That woman never stops surprising me. Let her sleep, Commander. We can get a full report from her when she wakes up." "Yes, sir," Lisa said. She ended the communication and took one more look at the cargo bay door. She had served with Emily Park for 3 years. She had seen her handle every kind of crisis, from engine failures to hostile alien encounters. But she had never seen Emily let her guard down the way she had with those pups. She had never seen Emily trust anyone enough to fall asleep in their arms. Whatever had happened in that cargo bay, it was something special. Something that Lisa suspected would have consequences far beyond this one ship and this one mission. She turned and walked away, leaving Emily to sleep in peace. Inside the cargo bay, Emily stirred slightly. She was half awake and half dreaming. In her dream, she was back on Earth in the house where she grew up. Kevin was there too, sitting across the kitchen table from her. He was smiling that goofy smile he always had when he was about to tell a terrible joke. "Hey, sis," he said in the dream. "Nice friends you got there." Emily looked down and saw that Luna was still curled in her lap. The small pup's scales were warm against her legs, and her purring was a constant, gentle vibration. "They found me," she told. "Dream, Kevin. I was falling apart, and they found me, and they put me back together. That's what family does." "Dream," Kevin said. His smile got wider. "Even when family is a bunch of alien dinosaur cats." Emily wanted to laugh, but she also wanted to cry. She missed her brother so much. She was so scared for him. But for right now, in this moment between sleeping and waking, she let herself believe that everything would be okay. She would contact her mother as soon as she woke up. She would get an update on Kevin's condition. And whatever news she received, good or bad, she would face it. She would be strong, but she would not face it alone. She had pack now. 12 strange, beautiful predator children who had looked at a crying human and decided to help instead of hunt. Who had gathered every soft thing they could find, because they understood somehow that softness was what she needed. Emily pulled the pups closer and let herself drift back into sleep. Outside the cargo bay, the day ship flew on through the stars, carrying its cargo of humans and Valkyrie toward whatever future waited for them. And in the nest of soft things in the corner of Cargo Bay 7, a bond was forming that would change the relationship between two species forever. Neither the humans nor the Valkyrie knew it yet. But this moment, this simple act of comfort from children to caretaker, would echo through history. It would be studied and discussed and held up as an example of what was possible when two different kinds of people chose to see each other not as threats but as family, all because 12 young predators had noticed that their human was sad and had decided to do something about it. 6 months had passed since the night in Cargo Bay 7. 6 months since 12 Valkyrie pups had built a nest of soft things around a crying human woman. 6 months since everything had started to change. Emily Park stood in the great hall of the Valkyrie homeworld, wearing her dress uniform and trying not to fidget. The hall was enormous, with ceilings that stretched up so high they disappeared into shadows. The walls were made of dark stone, carved with images of hunting scenes and great battles from Valkyrie history. Thousands of Valkyrie filled the space, standing in perfect rows as they watched the ceremony unfold. Today was the signing of the Human Velthary Alliance Treaty. It was the most important diplomatic event in the history of both species. And Emily was here because somehow, impossibly, she had become a central figure in making it happen. She still did not fully understand how that had occurred. After the incident on the horizon edge, things had moved quickly. The adult Velthary had recovered from their injuries, and when they saw the security footage of their children building a comfort nest around a human, they had been deeply affected. The Velthary commander, a massive male named Korath, had watched the footage 3 times without saying a word. Then he had asked to speak with Emily. That conversation had lasted for hours. Korath had asked her questions about human emotions and human culture and human ways of forming bonds. He had been particularly interested in the concept of trust. Among the Velthary, trust was earned through demonstrations of strength. You proved yourself worthy of trust by showing that you could not be easily defeated. But Emily had earned the trust of the pups by doing the opposite. She had shown weakness. She had let them see her at her most vulnerable. And instead of losing their respect, she had gained their loyalty. Korath had called this revolutionary. He had said that for generations, the Velthary had been trying to teach their young that true strength was not just about physical power. That wisdom and compassion and restraint were just as important as claws and fangs. But the lessons never seemed to stick. The pups always responded better to displays of dominance than to lectures about empathy. Until Emily, her pups, as Korath now called them, had learned something in that cargo bay that no Velthary teacher had ever been able to convey. They had learned that protecting the vulnerable was not a weakness, but a strength. That responding to pain with comfort was not soft, but brave. That pack bonds could form across species if both sides were willing to be honest about their needs. The 12 pups had returned to their homeworld as changed creatures. They told their story to anyone who would listen. They demonstrated the forehead press gesture. They had learned from Emily. They spoke about the human concept of family and how it was different from, and yet similar to, the Velthary concept of pack. Their story spread, first through their home territory, then across the entire planet. Within months, Emily Park had become famous among the Velthary, not as a soldier or a diplomat, but as the human who had trusted predator children with her broken heart. And the Velthary had listened. They had debated and discussed and argued, as they always did. But in the end, they had decided that if their own young could learn to see humans as pack, then perhaps the adults could learn the same lesson. The Alliance Treaty had been negotiated in record time. Both species were tired of the tension and mistrust that had marked their relationship since first contact. Both sides wanted to find a better way forward. And now here they were in the Great Hall, ready to make history. Captain Rivera stood at the front of the human delegation, looking proud and a little overwhelmed. He had been promoted twice since the Horizon Edge incident. Emily had been promoted too. She was Commander Park now with her own ship and her own crew. But she had taken a leave of absence to attend this ceremony because wild horses could not have kept her away. The Velthary High Council sat on a raised platform at the far end of the hall. These were the oldest and most respected members of their species. Their scales had faded to pale silver with age, and their eyes held centuries of wisdom. They watched the proceedings with expressions that revealed nothing. But Emily was not looking at the High Council. She was looking at the group of young Velthary standing in the front row of the audience. 12 adolescents now, much larger than they had been 6 months ago, but still recognizable to her eyes. Her pups, Rika, stood at the center of the group. She had grown significantly, and her purple scales had deepened to an almost black color. Her amber eyes found Emily's across the crowded hall, and the young Velthary made a soft chirping sound that somehow carried through the noise. Emily smiled and lifted her hand in a small wave. The ceremony proceeded with speeches and rituals and the actual signing of the treaty documents. Emily listened to the words about cooperation and mutual respect and shared futures. She heard the promises of trade agreements and technology exchanges and joint exploration missions. It was all very important and very historic, but the moment that mattered most came afterward. When the official ceremony was complete, the crowd began to disperse. Dignitaries mingled with each other, and reporters captured images for the news broadcasts. Emily started to make her way through the crowd toward the exit when she heard a familiar chirping sound directly behind her. She turned and found herself face to face with 12 young Velthari who had somehow navigated the entire length of the Great Hall in the time it had taken her to walk 10 steps. Commander Emily Rika said through her translator. The mechanical voice could not convey emotion, but Emily's ears had learned to hear the feelings in the original chirps. There was joy there, and love. "We are happy you came." Emily looked at her pups. They had grown so much. They were nearly adult size now, with claws that could do real damage and muscles that could overpower most humans. But when they looked at her, she still saw the children who had gathered soft things to comfort a crying stranger. "I would not have missed this for anything," she said. Her voice was thick with emotion. "I am so proud of all of you. What you did changed everything. You know that, right?" Rika tilted her head in that curious way she still had. "We only did what was right," she said. "You were hurting. Pack helps pack. But I was not your pack," Emily said. "Not then. I was a stranger. I was not even the same species. Why did you help me, Dot?" There was a long pause. The other pups looked at Rika, waiting for her to answer. Finally, the large female stepped forward and pressed her scaled forehead against Emily's cheek, just like she had done 6 months ago in the cargo bay. "Dot, you showed us your heart," Rika said softly. "You did not hide your pain or pretend to be strong. You let us see you as you really were. That is the bravest thing anyone has ever done in front of us. And we decided that anyone brave enough to be that honest deserved to be protected." Emily felt tears stinging her eyes. She blinked them back because she was a commander now, and commanders were supposed to maintain their composure in public. But these were her pups, and they had already seen her cry once. She did not think they would judge her for doing it again. "My brother survived," she told them. "Kevin, the one I was crying about. He made it through the surgery, and he recovered. He's going to be fine." The pups made happy chirping sounds, and several of them pressed close to nuzzle against Emily's hands and arms. Luna, who was still the smallest of the group, butted her head against Emily's hip in a gesture of affection. "Good," Rika said. "That is good. We are glad." Emily wrapped her arms around as many of the pups as she could reach. She did not care that they were in the middle of a crowded hall surrounded by dignitaries and reporters. She did not care that this moment would probably end up on every news broadcast in both human and Velthari space. Let them watch. Let them see what real alliance looked like. Not just treaties and trade agreements, but two species choosing to see each other as family, choosing to be packed. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities. There would be challenges ahead. There always were. But Emily knew that whatever happened, humans and Velthari would face it together, because that was what Pack did. They showed up. They gathered soft things. They pressed close and purred in the darkness, and they never ever let each other fall apart alone. Emily closed her eyes and let herself be held by 12 predators who had become the most important beings in her life outside of her own family. Somewhere in the crowd, she heard Captain Rivara laughing and saying something about how this was definitely going on her performance review. She did not care. She was home.